Welcome back to the show. I'm sure for any of my regular podcast listeners, you are excited to see me joined by a new face tonight. It's been a month of solo podcast episodes, but we are back at it in February with someone who is local to me. So I'm really excited to welcome Molly Darling to the show. She's a multidisciplinary artist and imagination doula, and she and I bonded over deconstructing, coming out, and of course, art. And they also just launched their podcast with their partner, Christian Rivera. It's called Behind the Studio Door, and you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. So, Molly, first of all, let's start with this. You launched this brand new project this week, and I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget. This is really fun. I love that we met randomly at Muck Duck Studio over art and all the things. And yeah, thanks for the shout out for our new podcast. It's very exciting because with my business, The Darling Revolution, I had a podcast of my own called The Darling Revolution Podcast for a long time that you can still find. There's like 3 seasons of it in the ethers, wherever you listen to podcasts. But I got to the point where I just got so burnt out recording solo episodes and into my phone and just like not talking to other people. It just got too isolating. So I took a hiatus for a couple of years. And then last year, 2023, in May, I was invited onto a podcast, also local, called Behind the Glass. Because I was one of the featured artists and they interview all the artists who are part of the show. And I got to meet my now producer of our podcast, Behind the Studio Door. His name is Chris Lindstrom. Stromy. Shout out to him. He's awesome. He's the host of a podcast called Food About Town, another local podcast. And when I met him and we recorded that podcast, it was basically like he's got this amazing studio in his home. It's like being on radio. We've got this big custom table and there's like 6 microphones and we're live producing. It feels like being on radio with friends, right? And so I had that one experience and I was like, oh, wait, I love podcasting actually. I'm realizing I just want to do it in a way that's like with friends and around a table and collaborative. And so pretty much on the spot, I pitched him this idea for the show Behind the Studio Door, an idea that I had had simmering for like a year before that. But I was just like, I don't want to do it by myself. So it's a good idea, but and so the podcast is basically myself and my husband, Christian Rivera, and our producer, Chris, all kind of sitting around the table, talking about the art scene in Rochester, New York, and interviewing creative professionals in this city. And really, my whole goal is to uplift the creative community in Rochester, New York, because it's really something special. And I think we have a long way to go to elevating and showing not only folks in Rochester, but outside of Rochester, how fabulous it is. And I'm also really interested in like, under the surface, since the pandemic, what does the inner and outer landscape look like for creatives in Rochester? Like, how are people feeling? What are they thinking about? Like, how are they dealing with, the world at large, but then also their own personal practice? So we have 1 episode out so far. It's a great introductory episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And it's basically conversation between the 3 of us talking about all this and our creative backgrounds. And it's really, really fun, like really fun. So
yeah. Oh my goodness. So do you have any idea who your guests are going to be? Do you have some lined up or what are you thinking? I'm excited.
Sure do. Yeah, one of my superpowers is connection and booking people. When I met Christian for the first time, we actually met podcasting online. He was on the West Coast and I was here in Rochester, and he assumed that I was like a producer of a show in LA because of the way that I just talked about things. And when he told me that, it totally shocked me because I was like, what? I'm like, a mom of 2 in Rochester, rural upstate New York, just kind of doing my thing. But so I've been loving reaching out to people. We already have 6 shows already interviewed, and we have a bunch more coming. So the first interview that's going to come out is with our friend Sally Louise, who's also part of Muck Duck Studio. She's a fantastic music professional. She was an
Mm-hmm.
opera singer. She's really skilled. Now she's like a singer-songwriter as she releases her own music. So, musicians, we're talking to visual artists, we're talking to curators, we're talking to producers, we're talking to wrestlers, like all these
Oh, yes.
comedians, So our definition of creativity is vast because my
Mm,
definition of creativity is vast and deep. It's
yeah.
like, it really is the life force energy that we all are imbued with as human
Mm,
beings. And we're all at different places of recognizing it and using it. And so my smuggle with everything I do is trying to get folks who don't see themselves as creative to see how they
mm,
are.
yes.
So yeah, it's a very exciting lineup so far. And I can't say everybody's names yet, but there's some big ones
Yeah.
coming down the pipe. So it's very
Oh my
exciting.
gosh. Yes, I can't wait. Yes. And by the way, everyone, I highly suggest that you head out wherever you listen to podcasts and go subscribe now so you get the updates when new episodes are released. I did. I'm already a subscriber on Spotify, so I'm super
Like,
excited.
yes.
Um, yeah, so I guess thinking in that vein of like creativity and imagination, you bill yourself as an imagination doula. And the first time I read that, I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. Because I kind of think
Thank
of
you.
yeah, of course. I kind of think of my medium in art to be both language, words, and also the feeling that is embodied in that. And so
Hmm.
that thinking of the idea of an imagination doula got me super excited. So I'd love for you to just dig in and tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate that reflection so much. And it's interesting because I, like you, have had kind of a varied career. I'm 35 and I've probably had about 30 jobs in my life. Like, I just really like trying lots of things. I mean, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, so I'm always like collecting these skills, right? And my background professionally is in facilitation, mentoring. Before I left the evangelical church, I was a worship leader and like a college campus minister for 10 years. And so I have like that, space holding ability. Even though it was in a religious setting, it was still very much the skills of helping people connect to what they were having issues with in their life and just being there, to hold space for them. And then I ended up, being a teacher for a number of years. I have a bachelor's and a master's in education. And so I almost went for my PhD and then I got pregnant with my son. So that's like a different story. But so all of that to say that my background is very much in training in active and reflective listening. And I ran a play therapy program called Primary Project through our local charter school here. And like, that was one of my favorite things. And so taking all of those, kind of composting all of those roles together over time, ended up synthesizing into this role of imagination doula, which for me means that I come alongside of folks and organizations and communities. So some of my clients are business owners, and I'm helping them with the structure and frameworks of their business. And some of my clients are individuals, and I'm helping them through a crisis or a transition. And essentially I'm in the role of a doula, where if you're a birth doula and because you've done it before, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool, um, you're not there to birth the baby for them. You're there to be right next to them the whole way, help them breathe, help them remind them where they are and what they're doing and why they're
Yeah.
doing it. And really just gives me full body goosebumps even talking about it. It's just like
Mhm.
really holding a person through a big transition. And the imagination piece is very much connected to my artistic practice. So I'm also a professional artist and have been for 15 plus years at varying capacities. And so that practice informs my imagination doula work in that I see creativity and imagination as the most important resource that we have available to us as human beings. And in a time when all our external structures are really changing and shifting, and there's like a big, deep sense of like tectonic plates of the structure of our society and culture and how we approach the world is really changing. And in order for us to move, over the bridge from here to there of building a new world in the way that's equitable, in a way that serves everyone and not just a few people, like we have to have our imaginations online to do that. And so I see myself as really doulaing imagination back into an active place in folks' lives in preparation for that shift, like in preparation for us needing people to be able to access their imaginations. And if folks are in a place of like survival or, using their creativity to just get through the day, which a lot of people are, and that's not like, it's not bad or wrong, but it's like we can do better for ourselves and for our society. And so to me, it's like for those who can access their imagination, I'm helping them access it in a way where it's not overwhelming. So then they feel empowered and a sense of sovereignty. So just like back to the doula work, it's like you're giving a sense of empowerment and sovereignty and ownership over this process. And you're really helping folks through it. And it's fun for me because it's work that looks different completely depending on my clients. So like I have a local client here that's a brick and mortar wellness space. And, I help her with ideation and like, what's the next thing that she's focusing on in terms of building her community. I have individual clients who are going through big life transformations, and I'm helping them, really in Voxer, like voice memos every day, being like, you're doing a great job. And like, here is the creative practice that you can use to move through this next big feeling. So it's fun for me as an artist because again, like it looks different every day, but the core of it is the same. So,
oh my gosh, there's so much goodness that I want to dissect with you in what you just said. I don't even know where to begin, but I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning and just reflect to you that, again, your language that you use is so like delicious to me, because I feel like we have this similar way of using non-traditional vocabulary to describe things that people might otherwise see as very mundane things. So like composting all of your roles together, like, oh my God, the imagery that goes into that. Yes, I had never thought about that, but as a human design manifesting generator, that's what I do.
I'm a projector.
Collect, It's really nice. I love the projector MG energy a lot.
Yeah, me too.
But but like that idea of it's like, I feel like sometimes people tend to want to forget or throw away or discard or say, oh, well, that was a failure. But what if we were to look at that as that's like compost is what people would consider scraps, but it becomes this rich, nutritional, like gold that can be used to generate new life. What if we looked at our past in terms of compost? I don't know if you're familiar with Sophie Strand, but this is really up.
I'm not, but now I should follow this person. It sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. You will love her. But if we looked at our past in terms of this rich compost for the lives that we're generating, I think just that one shift alone could change the way that we view, ourselves and what we're doing.
Yeah, I really agree. And it's like, it's a shift that's, I feel like I've fought hard for understanding my life that way. Like it's come at the cost of a lot of my own personal systems and structures being deconstructed and having to really look at them, like in order to survive through divorce, through leaving the church, through having to figure out court and co-parenting and all these very real like struggles of life. It's softened me to a point where it's like, oh, now I can look back and see how all of this has become the fertile soil. And I love that reframe and that shift, because I feel the same way about our world at large. It's like we often talk about like burn it all down and all of these kind of like anti-language things. And while it's important for us to make those shifts, I think it can be a little bit throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where it's just like, yeah, but then we end up burning down our whole world. And how can we actually be a little more intentional and creative and imaginative in using the structures and resources that we already have in place, but shifting them to where it actually serves everybody, you know, instead of like starting from zero. It's like, how can we actually kind of tilt things a little bit, or like shift one thing in a way that like systematically it really changes the flow, you know? And again, people need to have access to their imaginations to think about this shit.
Yeah. So you perfectly segued into this next note that I'd kind of pinned into our conversation about. So you talk about the process of doulaing and being beside people through this birthing process, whatever they're going through. And I think we go through a lot of them in our lives, these iterations. And you're familiar with this because you've birthed children. In labor, there's this point traditionally called transition, where
Mm-hmm.
you can see it and you can sense it like energetically around people, but you get to this point where all of a sudden their face changes, and it's like
Yep.
this wall goes up, this protective like bubble goes up, and they are in it by themselves. And even as a doula, it's like this sacred barrier that you don't want to, push into. I think that I'd be really curious hearing from you, what does that look like in a creative space, that process?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Oh, yeah, it's really, to me, I'm still discovering in a lot of ways, because it's like working in a professional capacity as an imagination doula is still a relatively new thing for me. Like, it's been something I've been calling myself for a long time, and it's literally been this year that it's finally become fully baked enough, you know, like got all these pots on the stove simmering, and it's like, okay, this one's finally ready to serve, you know. So I'm still in an emergent process of discovering that. But one of the things that I've noticed that's so cool, so I'll use one of my clients without, you know, sharing her information, but one of the most beautiful shifts I hear is actually in voice, um, which is kind of interesting because it's like when you're in transition in a space of like birthing a physical baby out, you know, um, there's this moment where you start like growling, like there's this
Oh my
guttural
God,
thing.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and it like
Mm-hmm.
connects you to your root, is you're connected to your butt. You
Yes,
know, you're
yeah,
just like,
yep,
you are rooted, and there
mm,
is literally nothing that can stop this birth from happening now.
yep.
And I've started to sense that in this client. Like, she came to me and her voice pitch was a lot higher. You know, she was in a spiral. She's going through a personal crisis. She needed help working through it. And over the time that I've worked with her, I've reflected this back. It's like, your voice has gotten slower, deeper. I can feel it, you know, like I can feel the embodiment and the slow rooting process that's happening of really like, this is going to come to fruition. I can trust the natural process, you know, because it's kind of like that with birth transition too. It's like, it's happening now. Like, the process is the process. We can't, like, we can't not birth this baby, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also really interesting that you talked about transition and like the point of no return, that I don't know if you realize that we're actually recording on the pagan holiday Imbolc, which
You
is
know what? Woo, I just got like
literally that
chills from
moment.
head to toe.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's literally that moment, that midway point between winter starting and winter ending, that says it's not here yet, but it's definitely coming, right? Like, it's happening.
Yeah,
And I
powerful.
think the easiest way to tell that with my clients so far has been physical voice, like presence. You can
Oh,
tell
yeah.
that they're starting to really like feel solid in their sovereignty. And to me, that's
Mm,
the best feeling. I'm like, great. I want to work myself out of a job with you. You know, like,
yes. Yeah.
I want you to be able to take this in, because I'm not your savior. I'm not the one who's going to birth this baby. You're going to
Yeah.
do it, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
sometimes you just
Mm.
need someone next to you who's reminding you, yeah, actually, you're doing it, you know?
Oh my God. This is awesome, because I was wondering why I have been in this vein of like there are certain topics that I think come through and they won't release me until the right time is for them to let me go. And this has
Mm-hmm.
been one of them, the idea of the idea of transition in these points in birthing processes. And we talked a little bit before I hit record about how there's one in death as well. There's a
Yeah.
transition in the death process where that person just kind of like pierces the veil and they're reaching the other side. And like, there's very little communication that we have with them anymore. They're in that process of crossing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
they're
so,
transitioning. They're on their way, It's like same portal, different directions. I hope.
yeah, so of course we're gonna have background noise because there are children present, and this is just part of life and life's
Yeah,
processes. So
it's
we're
great
just
and perfect. We both have kids. This is real life, y'all.
this is real. Yep, yep. But my thought was oh baby, hi. In this transition
Oh,
being so important this week, you saying that I think really confirms like the reason why it's that time in this season. It's that time planetary and like nature, I feel like is such a beautiful reflector of things that we often forget or rhythms that we often tend to leave behind. And it's so important to connect back to nature and back to like the planetary cycles because we're all made of the same stuff. And we
mm-hmm.
think that somehow we can rise above it or escape it. And it's like, no, but the idea of these seasons and these transitions are here to inform us about how to better care for ourselves and each other and our planet. And
Yeah.
so that being an important concept this week, the concept of birth and death and transition makes so much sense now because the pagan holidays are so connected to the natural rhythms and cycles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a beautiful,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me think too about, the idea of wintering. Like here in upstate New York in Rochester, we have a really long winter and it's like so gray and can have the potential of being, so depressing, kind of like a meme at this point. And I
Yes.
used to really, really dread the winter time. And it's really interesting as I've been in this personal process of listening more and more to nature, to the seasons, to my own body's cyclical nature. It's interesting how when you don't kind of resist the energy of a season, then you're able to take the lessons from it that it needs. It's like no being, plant, or animal is in bloom all year long. If that was the case,
Yes.
they would not survive. It's like
Yes. Mm.
you need fallow seasons where the soil can suck and rest.
Yep.
And so it's like, and what that looks like for us is, more sleep, literal, mama bear
Yeah.
hibernation moments. And
Mhm.
it's like, how can we find ways to more and more at an emergent level listen to ourselves, listen to our bodies, listen to nature, even as we're in the midst of a society that's not there yet? Like how
Mm.
can we imagine our way to a better way to
Yeah.
be in reciprocal relationship with nature and have our marketplaces and the ways we relate to each other align with that as opposed to some outdated industrial notion of how we relate to them, which like it had its place. It really brought civilization to where it is now. And also we're not in that phase anymore. Like we need to care for our earth and our bodies. And it's like listening is like really the common denominator here between everything. It's like I listen to my clients is the main skill that I have, and it's just like helping them to listen to themselves and to their natural rhythms. So
Oh
yeah.
my God. Oh, this is so beautiful. I feel like waves bouncing back and forth off each other, but
I know.
that 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 listening, you're tying in, I think really harkens back to this concept of how you've noticed the voices in your clients. I
Hmm.
had a podcast guest, and I'll send people back to her episode. It was Carol May Whittick, and
Hmm.
she talks about how she coaches her clients through vocally this same process, how rooting in and finding a home in their body and in their voice shifts massively things for them.
Yeah.
And I want to I want to tie this all together. There's definitely something kind of magical or maybe just extra earthly about the idea of listening, of nature, and of sort of this hum, this like ever present hum that there is.
Hmm.
I found myself the other day on my yoga mat, like releasing this guttural hum through my meditation. And it felt like my body felt so good with that resonance. And I just,
It physically clears you.
it
Like
does.
that's such a good practice.
It totally does. I think like my cells felt like they were getting shaken and like cleansed. And I'll even say my dog, who's going nuts right now, came and laid down on me as I was doing this and just like totally grounded.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I think if people are listening and they're like, okay, how does this apply? You know, what can I take from this? Because I always love to give some nuggets of what can we do? What can we take from this conversation?
Yeah.
Simple things like finding a home in your own voice. Like
Yeah.
just practice humming or oming or whatever the sound is that you want to release, and go up and down and find this spot. There is a spot for me when I get to that note that
Hmm.
feels like home. It feels grounded and it feels really good. Like find that and just do that on every exhale and
Hmm.
see what
You can feel it in
happens.
your butt.
You can. It's true. Your root
Like the best way to
chakra.
say it. It's like you can start high, like with a high
Yep.
note, and they don't have to be on, like, they don't have to be tonal, right? You don't have to be
Yeah.
a good
Yep.
singer to do
Mm-mm.
this. You just start with a higher note and slowly lower, and then you can really feel the resonance
You do.
going through your body.
Yes.
I also want to add too that if folks who are listening are like, okay, this all sounds well and good, but I really have no clue how to actually like start by myself because I'm just
Yeah.
spinning all the time. I actually have a Substack called The Blanket Fort with Molly Darling,
Mm.
and it's $6 a month. And
Yes.
basically, I have daily prompts that
Mm.
just are gentle. So we just finished our January challenge, which was called Create and Hibernate.
Mm.
And as opposed to a normal, you know, like, or a traditional January challenge of like pushing yourself and like making the whatever, it's like,
Yeah.
it's softer. It's like a
Yeah.
challenge to really show up and check in with your
Mm.
creativity. But it's
Mm.
also some days I'll be like, hey, this feels like a nap day. Y'all need to take a nap, you know? And it's a really beautiful community in this little digital blanket fort that we're forming that, you know, even if you aren't in a place where you can hire me as an imagination doula, which, you know, is like a different level of work and depth,
Yeah.
this is an easy access way
Yep.
to start playing with listening to your body and listening to your
Yes.
creativity. And, you know, I give prompts that folks don't usually think about, you know, like
Yep.
I'll send you a song or a poem and ask a question related to
Mm.
it. And it really, like, you know, using my teaching chops there, it's really, really fun
Yeah.
for me. So
Yes.
if folks need a place to go to land like that, the blanket fort is available for you. And like there's a mama in there who has toddlers, and she
Mm.
always talks about how she loves that it's the blanket fort because finally it's a place for us that I don't have to clean up after myself.
Oh, yes. I was just thinking how like this idea of blanket forts, like when I was a child, we used to like flip the couches and throw the blankets over and like hunker down in there. Like that was such a
Heck yeah.
safe, beautiful space as a kid. And I love that you're calling it the blanket fort. Like that just gives me all the warm fuzzies, this idea.
Right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. Um, I would love to continue talking with you forever, but we have guests who are going to wander in and scream in the background periodically.
Babies.
And so I think that we're going to wrap up, and if we need to do another episode, we're going to do another episode. But
Absolutely. I love talking to you, Bridget.
yes,
This is
oh
so
my
much
God, you
fun.
too. Oh my gosh. And I've actually named the painting on the wall that I got from you. And I gave her the name Sophia because it's like the feminine embodiment of wisdom. And I
Oh,
love this concept of like the feminine and the fact that she's putting herself back together and like remembering is my thing. Where like you're an imagination doula, I have this thing that I'm obsessed with about like each of us already has everything we need for our purpose. Like we came here and our job is to remember it, not to find it. It's
Mhm.
already within us. We
Right.
put ourselves back
Yeah. It's like
together.
we have it, you have it already. It's just like, life and responsibilities just is like detritus that kind of covers it up. And I just help
Yeah.
folks clear those pipes so you can hear
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So
So
thank you so much for
I
having
look
me
at
on the
her
show.
every night and I think about you every time I look at her, which is kind of neat. So yes,
That's
I cannot
amazing.
wait. I cannot wait to
I
have
also
another
started
conversation.
naming, it's really
Ooh,
funny that you
okay.
say that before we wrap up because I know I sold that painting to you before she had a name,
Yep.
and I love that you named her Sophia. My three newest paintings are actually named Ophelia, Aurora, and Celestia. So I'm like, oh, they're all sisters. Like, what
Wow.
the
Oh my
fuck?
God. Again,
Oh, I
like
love it.
crazy about it. Like I'm surprised my hair is not standing up on the top of my head right now. That's really
Yes.
freaking cool. I love
Mhm.
this. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap us up and then I look forward to having another conversation with you very, very soon. So thank you
sounds
everyone
great.
for joining us. Of course, I will send you all to Molly's links in the show notes. And we're going to send out some links to everyone who we've mentioned because we just have like a rich community of creators here in the Rochester area. So even if you're not
Heck
local,
yeah.
please check them out and support them. We do appreciate it. And thank you to all of my listeners for showing up for another episode of Passionate Pursuits.